The Kazakhs were historically a nomadic Muslim Turkic people native to the steppes of Central Asia. The steppes are very arid and dry, with low rainfall and prone to extreme droughts. Due to the harsh climate, the best way of life was pastoral nomadism, where nomads would perform seasonal migrations with their herds to provide grazing ground. In the mid-19th century, the Russian Empire conquered the Kazakh Khanate into its imperial realm, and the Kazakhs were now subjects to the Tsar. From here on, Russians and other Slavic colonists would settle in Kazakh lands and often take the most fertile regions, which disrupted the lives of the nomads. In 1919 to 1922, the Turkistan famine broke out due to major droughts and killed 10 to 20% of the Kazakh population. The Kazakhs, upon Russian conquest, went from 90% of the population to just 57% of the population in the 1920s, while the Slavic settlers grew to over 30% of the population in Soviet Kazakhstan. In 1929, the Soviets launched a collectivization policy on the nomadic Kazakhs, which means forcing nomads into fixed settlements. The Soviets, in their process of state building, believed that the nomadic lifestyle was backwards and was an obstacle to modernity and social progress, and aimed to eradicate it through collectivization. They also believed the nomads were not using the land productively, and by forcing nomads to become sedentary would lead to better use of the land. Furthermore, the Kazakhs had a clan-based society headed by beys or wealthy peasants who owned majority of the livestock. The Soviets interpreted the system as sort of feudalism and saw it as a violation of their Marxist policies. Many Kazakhs would resist the brutal collectivization policy and as a result were slaughtered en masse by the Soviets. The Kazakhs were often placed in very dry areas as opposed to the Slavs living in more fertile areas. The animal population, due to poor Soviet management, also declined drastically during these projects, leaving fewer animals available for people to eat, resulting in starvation. Masses of Kazakhs attempted to flee the famine and desperately went to busy train stations in other countries searching for food. Masses of Kazakhs would get shot and die fleeing, while many others starved to death. Historical accounts report that while passengers would ride the Soviet trains, they would see masses of dead bodies in the steppes throughout their ride, which were dead Kazakhs fleeing the famine or dying of starvation. The famine ended in 1934, but by then, 90% of the animals had died, leaving zero possibility for any future revival of the nomadic life. The Soviets were forced to import animals from China to make up for the loss. All in all, this collectivization project destroyed and eliminated the several millennia-old nomadic lives of the steppes. Statistics claim that the two major famines killed up to 3 million Kazakhs, who now dropped to only 29% of the population in the 1940s. The Slavic settlers were at this point the demographic majority, at over 50%, and now the Kazakhs were now a minority in their native lands. It seems that the destiny of the Kazakhs was going to be the same as the native people of the Americas and Australia, who are now tiny minorities in their nations. However, things took a bright turn for the Kazakh people. After 60 years, in the 1990s, upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, the now sedentary Kazakhs, due to high birth rates and Russian emigration, rebounded to 40% of the population, slightly becoming the largest ethnic group once again, while Russians were now 37%. Today, Kazakhstan is a sovereign nation, ruled by its native people. who make up over 70% of the population, while the Russians and other Slavic people have dropped to 15 to 20% of the population. Kazakhstan is now in the process of re-establishing their Kazakh identity, culturally, linguistically, and religiously. The importance and practice of Islam has revived in Kazakhstan after such a low point during the Soviet era. Despite the massive death toll, this horrendous tragedy is not reported as a genocide. Scholars on this topic do not find any clear evidence of the Soviets intending to eliminate the Kazakh people as a whole, but rather it was brushed under Soviet mismanagement and poor economic policies which resulted in the economic disaster and the famine. Furthermore, Kazakhstan is hesitant to mention this as a genocide due to its strong political ties with Russia today. Additionally, the Soviet Union is no longer an entity, so it would be hard to hold anyone accountable for this tragedy today. Today we learned about how indigenous people were forced out of their traditional way of life and forced to accept a foreign one, how they were killed off by famines and settlers, but have now rebounded to sovereignty of their nation and re-established their language, culture, and religion. This story should remind us to remain optimistic about the Palestinian people and other indigenous peoples suffering from oppression. What do you think about the Kazakh story, and how does it relate to our current world events? Is this a genocide, or was this just Soviet mismanagement as they claim? Leave your comments below, and see you next time.